Hello everyone, how are you all? I hope everyone is doing well. Today we are back with the next chapter, that is the Fundamental Unit of Life, chapter number 5 of class 9, subject biology. So let's begin with the chapter that is Fundamental Unit of Life. The main objectives of learning of this chapter is to study about the discovery of cell, about the cell theory, about the structure organization of the cell, about the various component of cell and their functions, about differentiate between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, then about the diagram of plant and animal cell, and by understanding the different terms, that is chromosomes, DNA, and type of cell division. Now today in this part we are going to learn about various discovery of the cell. So let's begin. First of all, the question arises, what makes us different from a non-living things? Yes, how we differ from a table or a rock. Can anyone tell me? So, yes, children. The difference between living as well as non-living is there are various characteristics which shows or which differentiate between whether it is living or non-living. As you know, the table and rock cannot move from one place to another. As you can see, living organisms can move from one place to another. Living organisms do respiration, various other processes, whereas non-living things cannot perform such functions. So among all these functions, there are some of the characteristics of a living things which differentiate between the living and non-living things. So yes, first of all, movement. So as you know, all living organisms shows movement of moving from one place to another. In the plants, as you can see, they cannot move from one place to another, but though they shows movement in their growth and development, as well as you can see the molecules which keep on moving inside the body, inside the cell, various chemical reactions. So yes, all living organism shows movement, whereas respiration, whether it is unicellular or multicellular organisms, all follow the process of respiration. Sensitivity, growth, reproduction, excretion, and nutrition. So these are some of the characteristics of living things which differentiate from the non-living beings. So which is the basic component of your body which participates in all the above processes? So yes, as you saw that all the various processes which are carried out inside the living organisms, but yes, what is their basic component? So yes, cell is the basic component of all the living organisms. So the fundamental unit of life, that is the cell. So as you know, our planet Earth is inhabited by different types of living organisms, some that look similar while some look very different from each other. And this type of living organism, each organism is made up of basic structure and function of life, and that is called as the cell. So as you can see the structure of the cell. So what is this cell? So cell is defined as the structural and function unit of life. Now why structural and why function unit of life? So as you know, our body is made up of various cells. The structure which has been formed by different organisms, that is due to the cell. Even functional, yes, why it is called as the function unit of life? Because various cells, whether it is unicellular or multicellular organism, the functions itself carries the different functions, whether it is in the group, whether it is in the single form. So all these functions are carried out by the cell. So cell is defined as the structural and function unit of life. So yes, when the cell was observed under the microscope, it was just like a brick wall. So how we can see that one of the brick arranged after one another, how the structure is formed. The same way, when this cell has been observed under the microscope, it just look like how the arrangement of a brick wall. So this is observation of onion peel under the microscope, and this is how it looks. So there are various discoveries which was done by the various scientists, and in this topic we will see about different discoveries of various scientists. So yes, cell is the structural unit of life because the body of all organisms is made up of cell. and it is the function unit of life because all the functions of body, whether it is physiological function, whether it is biochemical function, genetically and other functions, all are carried out by the cells. Yes, now what is the discovery of the cell? So yes, the discovery of cell, first of all, Robert Hooke. So in the year 1635, Robert Hooke was the person, it was a time when it was born, and that is the time. And yes, his discovery, that was in the year 1665. So he was an English scientist, Robert Hooke, and he discovered a very small but significantly entity that became the foundational of life. So yes, he observed a thin shaving of cork, that is the word cork means it is a outer covering, or you can say bark of a tree, the hard covering of the tree, which is called as a bark, which is slightly brownish in color. So that was been observed by this Robert Hooke under a microscope, and found that it was made up of thousands of little compartments which he imagined, and he imagined them as a little rooms. So he named this small structure as cells, and his research did not provide any further insight on the structure of cell, but yes, the findings and research was published by Robert Hooke in his book, which was titled as Microphagia, in the year 1665. So he was the first person to discover the dead cell in the dead part of the plant, that is called as cork. And how it looks like, as you can see that when he observed under the microscope, they look like a small compartments. So why he called them as a cell? So he observed them like a small room, small compartments, and this is how the naming was given by him. Then later on, Anton van Leeuwenhoek, in the year 1632 to 1723, through the simple microscope, Robert Hooke could only see the outer thickened walls of the cork and could not provide any further insights. But yes, Anton van Leeuwenhoek, he observed the free floating algae, that is Spirogyra, swimming in the pond water, and discovered that these little animals were actually a single cell themselves. So he is also called as the father of microscopy because of the advances he made in the microscope design and use. So he further made some advances in the microscope, and it was he who discovered the bacteria, yeast, plant, and much more. So yes, his discovery gave rise to many scientists, even many researches, his researches which were widely circulated and opened up an entire world of microscopic life to the awareness of the scientists. So he just gave the scope for many scientists to do researches in many fields. So his microscope were much more advanced than the other scientists, and he investigated some of the bacterias, then some protists, some sperm cells, then yes, blood cells, even some roundworms was observed by Anthony von Leeuwenhoek. So this was the discovery of Anthony von Leeuwenhoek. Later on came the scientist, that is Robert Brown. So Robert Brown in the year 1831. So his discovery and the name, you can see, you have already learned about the structure of the cell in class 8. So you must have seen that in center of the cell organelle named as nucleus. So this nucleus was discovered by the Robert Brown. He also researched that the pollen grains in the water jiggled around, which is also called as Brownian motion. So even Brownian motion was discovered by Robert Brown. So the name, you can see the naming is done according to his name, that is Brownian motion. So Robert Brown discovered the nucleus in the cell. Later on, the other scientist named as J.E. Purkinje, in the year 1839, he was the physiologist, and yes, He named the living fluid substance which is present inside this cell called as protoplasm. So yes, inside this cell you have heard about cytoplasm. So yes, one more fluid which is present in the cell, that is named as protoplasm. So protoplasm which pertains to the living materials inside these cells. So yes, Purkinje discovered the term protoplasm. He coined the term protoplasm. Later on, advance in technology and continued research in the field helped scientists to develop a very important foundational theory of biology, and that is called as the cell theory. So yes, in the year 1838, Matthew Claydon proposed that all the plants composed of cells, and later in the year 1839, Theodor Sachsen in the year 1810 to 1882, he was the German zoologist, independently confirmed that all the living things, both plants and animals, are made up of cells. So first of all, Sladen made discovery that all the plants are made up of cells, and later on Sachsen confirmed that all the living things, both plants and animals, are made up of cells, and the cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life. And in the year 1855, another German biologist named as Rudolf Virchow further extended and refined the cell theory by proving that all the cells arises from pre-existing cells by dividing themselves. As you know that from the cells which are present inside the living organisms, they keep on forming, multiplying, division take place. So this all takes place from the previous cell, that is pre-existing cells, and they keep on dividing by themselves. So this was given by Rudolf Virchow, that all cell comes from the pre-existing cell. So this is the cell theory given by this all these three scientists, that is Matthew Claydon, Theodor Sachsen, Rudolf Virchow. So finally they concluded that all the plants are made up of cells, all the animals are made up of cells. So combining this, the cell theory has three main aspects, that is all living organisms are made up of single or many cells. So yes, this theory was given by these three scientists, that all the living organisms are made up of single or many cells, but yes, they are made up of cells. And second point they give in this cell theory is all cell arises from pre-existing cell by division. So no cell can originate on its own, but yes, instead it comes from into existing only by division of an already existing cell. So new cell arises from the existing cell. And yes, the third important point of the cell theory is the cell is the fundamental unit of structure in all the living organisms, and all the metabolic reactions take place in the cell. So these are some of the important discoveries which was given by some of the scientists. So you need to remember their discoveries given by the various scientists, that is Robert Hooke discovered non-living cell, Anthony von Leeuwenhoek discovered the living cell, protoplasm was discovered by Purkinje, Claydon and Sachsen discovered one of the most important point, that all the living organisms are made up of cell. And later on Rudolf Virchow, he redefined and the cell theory by proving that all the cells arises from pre-existing cells by dividing themselves. So these are some of the important points of this topic you need to remember about the discovery of the cell by the various scientists and cell theory. The next class we will see about some of the important characteristic of this cell, their differentiation, how they are divided into different shapes,